Our speaker has now arrived, and Sir Winston is smiling down on us with a sunny day, which is wonderful for rain-soaked mid-Missouri. And what a treat to have the sculptor return to celebrate her iconic work, a work of art called Breakthrough. Edwina Sandys has done heroic sculptures all over the world, but I've known her for some time, and I suspect this is among her very favorites. And it's been nearly 30 years since we filled this area with some 7,000 or 8,000 people to hear Ronald Reagan dedicate the breakthrough sculpture. And I was privileged to be among them. And ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to welcome back to Fulton breakthrough sculptor Edwina Sandys.
From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. Behind that line lie all the capitals of the ancient states of Central and Eastern Europe.
Our homes, our nation, all the things we believe in are in great danger. This danger has been created by the rulers of the Soviet Union.
All free men, wherever they may live, are citizens of Berlin. And therefore, as a free man, I take pride in the words, Ich bin ein Berliner.
General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, tear down this wall.
Hello, everybody. It's wonderful to be here today, and I'm just wondering in the audience how many of you are aged enough to have actually heard my grandfather on the radio. Any hands up? Are there any aged people here who are young at heart? Well, I'm sure there are a few. Anyway, we've all heard his words, and what I like to speak about today is words matter. Words do matter. History is the reason we are gathered here today to speak about three subjects, all intertwined. The famous speech, the church and museum, and the Berlin Wall sculpture. Now, Winston had a way with words. Apart from Shakespeare and the Bible, he's probably quoted more than any other source. There are quotes for all seasons, every possible situation. My favorite quote at the moment is this one. Some men change their party for the sake of their principles. Others their principles for the sake of their party. In 1946, my grandfather Winston Churchill made the historic Sinews of Peace speech, warning the world of the danger of post-war Russia. From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, I will not try to copy his way of speaking, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. I wish Grandpapa could be here today to read his speech once again, reminding us of his words, sadly, still relevant today. His words did not become flesh instantly, but after a while, they did become bricks and mortar. Between 1961 and 1969, while the Berlin Wall was being erected and expanded, Westminster College brought to Fulton, stone by stone, this Christopher Wren church. It had been bombed during World War II, but they rebuilt it here in Fulton as a memorial and library to commemorate the famous speech. This became the Winston Churchill Memorial and Library, now the National Churchill Museum. This wonderful monument binds us two countries together and is a symbol of the genius of both Christopher Wren and Winston Churchill, and the people of Westminster College and Fulton. This 50th anniversary celebrates the dedication of the church, St. Mary Aldermanbury, and is a fitting time for us all to make sure that it be preserved for future generations. The museum itself is so personal that when you enter it, you feel you are a part of my grandfather's world and can feel the emotion of all the ups and downs in his tremendously personal and powerful life. My own association with Fulton began around 1975. One of the New York friends of the Churchill Memorial came to an art exhibit I had at the Hammer Galleries in New York. She admired a painting I had made of St. Paul's Cathedral, Christopher Wren's iconic work. She asked me to donate it to the museum, which I did. Then later on, in 1979, at the onset of the Iran hostage war, just too excited to be with you all here. Later in 1979, at the onset of the Iran hostage crisis, I was invited to Fulton to ring the church bells, which they continued to do every single day until the hostages were returned. Thereafter, I visited Fulton many times, staying often with President Harvey Saunders and his wife Eve. The Berlin Wall was, in essence, the physical embodiment of the Iron Curtain. On November 9, 1989, like the rest of the world, I watched in amazement on television as Berliners sipped champagne sitting atop the wall that had divided their city for almost 3 decades. I had always wanted to make a sculpture for the Churchill Memorial at Westminster College, and this seemed the perfect moment. Friends in Berlin had come back with tiny little pieces of the wall, and I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could get some of it and make a sculpture? Without more ado, my husband, Richard Kaplan, architect, and I were en route to East Berlin, which in the interim was still being run by the communists. There we found the communists were quickly adopting capitalistic ways. We were a bit horrified to find out that they were charging $60,000 to $200,000 for each 12-foot by 4-foot segment. When we started to explain the sculpture was to be installed in Fulton, they waved us aside and said they knew all about Winston Churchill and the Iron Curtain speech. They gave us 8 sections at no charge. So then we had to get the 8 sections of the Berlin Wall transported. So how were we going to do that? Because the East Germans hadn't offered to pay for the shipping, but there is some wonderful man here today that you all know, Richard Mahoney. He managed to get his company to Monsanto to bring the pieces back. So we got them all back. We got them to New York City. And there I found a place that could cut it out. It was 12 foot by 32 foot. And at first I thought they'd be cut with a bandsaw or something like that. But there was, at that time, a reasonably new way of cutting things, at least for us, and that was using a water jet. So the piece was cut with a water jet and it went quite swiftly. And so what I did was I thought, how can I portray freedom? So in order to portray freedom, you have to have unfreedom. So unfreedom is portrayed by the wall, and then cutting the spaces shaped like a man and a woman was meant to be the way of portraying freedom. So we cut the pieces out of the wall in Queens, in New York, and I thought I'd have a lot of little gifties to give to everybody, all the bits that came out. You see this big spaces. But as it turned out, with this miraculous water jet, the pieces came out intact. So I call this sculpture Breakthrough. But the pieces that came out were shaped like a solid man and a solid woman. And I made another sculpture of that called Break Free, which is now at the library of the friend of my grandfather, Roosevelt. So it's at the Roosevelt Library in Hyde Park. So anyway, here we are. I cut the pieces out of it, shaped like a man and a woman, and you can all walk through it. And I named it Breakthrough. Now, we had to have a dedication, and everybody was so brilliant here. They sort of said, who would you like to have it, and who should we have? And then Ronald Reagan was chosen. He wasn't just chosen by us, he agreed to come. So he who had said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, dedicated the sculpture on the 9th of November, 1990, the first anniversary of the demise of the wall. In his speech, called The Brotherhood of Man, he declaimed, in dedicating this magnificent sculpture, may we dedicate ourselves to hastening the day when all God's children live in a world without walls. That would be the greatest empire of all. That was Ronald Reagan. Then later, in 1992, Mikhail Gorbachev came here to Fulton and made a speech he called The River of Time. He began, here we stand before a sculpture which conveys the drama of the Cold War, the irrepressible human striving to penetrate the barriers of alienation and confrontation. The Breakthrough sculpture is interactive. People can walk through from the bare blank gray side and arrive on the colored side, the sunny side. I like to think of it a little bit like a labyrinth, a meditation labyrinth. Walking through it, you can all make it a moment of meditation, making a wish, a resolve. I like to do that myself. History has a strange way of tricking you, lulling you into a false security. Just when you think something is finished with, done and dusted, it has a habit of raising its ugly head again. Things seem to be getting a little chilly again, and Grandpapa's words are as relevant as ever. Let us not forget that the speech was titled Sinews of Peace, and in that spirit, I have invited 30 beautiful young guests who have flown in specially to personify freedom and peace. Now, Grandpapa visited America many times, and sometimes would come back with gifts and things like that. But one year, he came back with a very special gift. It wasn't anything wrapped in paper or ribbons. It was a new word he had picked up in the New World. This word became in our family not just an exclamation of wonder, but also a term of comfort or endearment. The word was wow. W-O-W. At that time in England, people weren't using that word, but now everybody everywhere does, and I use it all the time. But what I'm going to do is, I'm going to go back through the wall and as I come back, I'm going to make a little wish, secret, and then I ask you all to join me as I walk through it, as Grandpapa would have liked, and I want you all to shout wow as loudly as you can. So you'll have to wait a minute. I'm going back. This is the very, very first. Peace and freedom, and what a beauty. Ah! Can we bring some up here so they can all see them? Let's do it. Come. Bring them all here. Let me have one in my hand, may I? This is a very chirpy one. Okay. Let me have one. Wow! 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 Now, how am I going to get back? Come on, Alan. You come. Alan's coming now.
Sorry, I need a hand. Good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I'm up. Good.
You're up. That was good, wasn't it?
It's easier for the birds. Anyway, it's wonderful to be here and for a moment of extraordinary celebration. I was in Berlin when the Berlin Wall went up. I was in Berlin when the Berlin Wall came down. And the principal reaction of Berliners to both events was incredulity. There was a remorselessness about the way the wall went up, section by section, and a sinking feeling which was shared by everybody on the Western side, that there was nothing realistically that could be done, either by the armed forces in West Berlin or by the people of West Berlin, and even less by the people of East Berlin, to prevent this monstrous wall from being put up. We hoped, some of us I think, that on the eastern side there would be some officials of the communist regime, of the DDR, which would feel perhaps, even if secretly, a sense of remorse. I found later when I did a documentary for the BBC in the DDR, and I met some of the people who'd been involved in constructing the wall in Berlin, that far from remorse, there was paradoxically and in a peculiar way a sense of pride. The story they told themselves and the story that was told to them by the Communist Party was that this wall was an act of defense. It was to protect the people of East Berlin and the people of the DDR from the threat of the West. Well, you know what this wall is like. It would not have prevented an attack, which was an armed attack or an army's attack or attack with tanks. It was there basically to keep people in and to keep ideas out. And for decades, it succeeded in that event. But remember, I'm sorry for the somber note, but do remember that there were a significant number of East Germans and East Berliners who died, were shot, trying to cross this wall to escape to freedom. This wall has enacted a price for the gift it has given. So this wall is not an empty symbol. This wall is alive with the meaning of history. And where we are so fortunate today is that we are able to celebrate solemnly but also cheerfully the victory of freedom and of ideas and of democracy, so that this wall is what it now is, a relic. Let us give a good wow to that.
Everybody come through the wall. By the way, I'm so happy so many of our family are here today. Emma Soames and Duncan Sands and Jack Churchill. And I thank everybody who's made this a wonderful day. So please, any of you who have not been through, come and make a wish through the wall.